everyone. We are here for another short series of Conversations for Change. Here with me is Karen Tramontano, who used to be a deputy of chief of staff under the Clinton's presidency in the United States. She's also a senior advisor for the International Labor Organization, while also being the CEO and founder of the Blue Star Strategies. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. We're very happy to talk to you, to also have some women voices here that ISIF conference. We have just spoken a lot about multilateralism and about the spirit of the UN and what role does it have. Specifically, there was one comment about the revival of multilateralism. So I wanted to ask you your opinion on that topic. Do you think we need the revival, or maybe there's completely another approach that we must take?
So thank you very much, and I'm happy to talk with you today. I think it's very important that young people are engaged and interested in these issues. So in terms of multilateralism, I think, let me say there are three issues that I see. One is that the major players in the multilateral system are really, I believe, using their proxy and surrogate issues of competitiveness or war or territorial gains or power, and they all get played out in the UN. And so things that should be managed in the Security Council are not, they're vetoed. And, other issues never make it to the appropriate places for dialogue because people walk away from that dialogue. And so we have over 80 conflicts in the globe right now. And the UN should be the forum for where those matters are, if not resolved, at least addressed, and there should be dialogue and engagement, and that's not happening. And the second issue is, I think, where multilateralism has really failed, and it's derivative of my first comment, is that people's lives are not impacted in a positive way due to the multilateral system. People have an expectation that they're going to benefit, not just because of UN engagement, but any of the other UN agencies, United Nations for development, for environment, for trade, and even in the ILO, that things, I think, for real people feel stuck, and they can see the solutions on the ground, but they don't have access to their leaders or to finance or to the things that they need to really have those solutions that they can envision work for them, because either their governments or the multilateral institutions are not, bringing the resources to bear to address those solutions. The third element, I think, is the United States and the upcoming administration. They are not engaged and do not fundamentally believe that a multilateral system, the international architecture that has existed for years, is a way to address issues. And I think they're going to pull back from engagement. And I think engagement that is needed. So that's how I would respond to your question.
That is actually very interesting that you mentioned the upcoming Trump administration. We have seen his recent nominations for different positions in office, which were quite interesting.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
Which also would lead me to my second question for you. Because also since you have worked under Clinton presidency, it would be very interesting for us to know if you see like the differences in approaches, because even though Clinton was indeed impeached by the end, and there were scandals like the Whitewater scandal, and Clinton still achieved a lot of good policies for the U.S. And especially with the free trade agreements, and just your comparison, like, because as you were saying, Trump's administration is not focused on engagement. So the question here is, sorry.
No, I was just going to say there are huge differences, and I'm biased. First of all, President Clinton was an internationalist. President Clinton believed in the international architecture. He believed in country engagement. He believed in leader engagement. And ultimately, he thought that the UN and other multilateral agencies with US participation could help to solve problems for people. So that was a fundamental belief. So we have a very, very different point of view in the incoming administration. In terms of, impeachment, very, very different issues. Republicans, during the Clinton era, were challenging the president because of a personal mistake. That is far different than a president who basically threatens another country, as he did with Ukraine, in exchange for U.S. support, wanted information on who would become his political competitor. So that is using the government of the United States people in a way to retain power. And then, secondly, this is a president who was, impeached a second time for trying to retain power and overthrow the transfer of power. Those are fundamentally different issues. Fundamentally different issues. The only thing I would say is that abuse of power was certainly not what President Clinton was engaged in, nor was he accused of doing that. And President Clinton was very much engaged in and believed in public service, and believed he yeah, and he believed in public service. He believed and in all of us who work for him believe fundamentally in public service. It wasn't about us; it was serving the American people, and I think that's a very different situation from an incoming president who is requiring a loyalty oath, because all of us who serve in public service, our loyalty is to the American people. Our loyalty is not to an individual president. So I am biased because I did serve President Clinton, and I continue to work with him through my non-governmental organization. But I think it's very different to believe in public service and to believe that people owe loyalty to you as an individual. But a very good question. People should ask that more so that the contrast can be articulated, because I think a lot of times
aren't
people
you doing that a lot through your organizations, meaning, for example, right, the Blue Star strategies, but also you have founded the Global Fairness Initiative as well. Could you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the Global Fairness Initiative, we really work exclusively in developing economies. We work in particular in the informal economy. We work with governments, we work with civil society, trade unions, and the private sector to move the informal economy and workers in the informal economy to the formalized economy, where that is rights-based, that has a social safety net, that has access to trade, access to the levers that would help to improve people's economic opportunity. So, and in Blue Star Strategies, we're just a good old-fashioned lobbying firm, and we do government affairs and public affairs and communications for our clients.
Is there anything specific that you could mention right now that you're doing, in relationship to the incoming Trump's administration?
Mostly I am holding my breath and hoping that all the things I'm afraid might happen don't, which is not a strategy, but no. And the other thing is, we're talking to a lot of people in these fora and in other places about, in particular, Project 2025, which is a very conservative blueprint for what very conservative policymakers think should be the future of the United States. And in some in some respects, I think it's antithetical to our Constitution. So it calls for a very strong executive branch. And if you know anything about the United States Constitution in its history, the strongest part of our government is our Congress, and that's in Article 2. And there was a reason for that. For our history, we did not want a strong executive, a strong sovereign, because that's what we had left in 1776. So.
That is amazing. Yes, we hope that all of those things are not going to happen, and that the United States is going to keep its democracy intact, because it's really necessary.
It is,
especially currently in the current geopolitical landscape.
Well, one thing I would say is young people, stay engaged and stay involved. We need you're the future leaders of the world, and so it's good to see your engagement.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.